Loving God, we give you thanks for the creative power and the healing mercy of your word. Speak to us, Lord, that we can see what you are about. Amen. I'm reading from John chapter 9, the entire chapter, from Eugene Peterson's translation known as The Message. Walking down the street, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, causing him to be born blind?" Jesus said, "You're asking the wrong question. You're looking for someone to blame. There is no such cause and effect here. Look instead for what God can do. We need to be energetically at work for the one who sent me here, working while the sun shines. When the night falls, the workday is over. For as long as I am in the world, there is plenty of light. I am the world's light." He said this and then spit in the dust and made a clay paste with the saliva, rubbed the paste on the man's eyes, and said, "Go, wash at the pool of Siloam," which means sent. The man went and washed and saw. Soon the town was buzzing. His relatives and those who year after year had seen him as a blind man begging were saying, Why isn't this the man we knew who sat here and begged?" Others said, "It's him all right." But others objected. "It's not the same guy at all. It just looks like him." He said, "It's me, the very one." They said, "How did your eyes get opened?" "A man named Jesus made a paste and rubbed it on my eyes and told me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' I did what he said. When I washed, I saw." "So where is he?" "I don't know." They marched the man to the Pharisees. This day when Jesus made the paste and healed the blindness was the Sabbath. The Pharisees grilled him again on how he had come to see. He said, "He put clay paste on my eyes and I washed and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "Obviously this man cannot be from God. He doesn't keep the Sabbath." Others countered, "How can a bad man do miraculous, God-revealing things like this?" There was a split in their ranks. They came back at the blind man. "You're the expert. He opened your eyes. What do you say about him?" He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews didn't believe it. Didn't believe the man was blind to begin with. So they called the parents of the man, now bright-eyed with sight, and they asked them, "Is this your son, the one you say was born blind? So how is it that he now sees?" His parents said, "We know he is our son, and we know he was born blind, but we do not know how he came to see. Haven't a clue about who opened his eyes. Why don't you ask him? He's a grown man and can speak for himself." His parents were talking like this because they were intimidated by the Jewish leaders who had already decided that anyone who took a stand that this was the Messiah would be kicked out of the meeting place. That's why his parents said, "Ask him. He's a grown man." They called the man back a second time, the man who had been blind, and told him, "Give credit to God. We know this man is an impostor." He replied, "I know nothing about that one way or the other, but I know one thing for sure. I was blind. Now I see." They said, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" "I've told you over and over, and you haven't listened. Why do you want to hear it again? Are you so eager to become his disciples?" With that, they jumped all over him. You might be a disciple of that man, but we're disciples of Moses. We know for sure that God spoke to Moses, but we have no idea where this man comes from. The man replied, "This is amazing. You claim to know nothing about him, but the fact is he opened my eyes." It's well known that God isn't at the beck and call of sinners, but listens carefully to anyone who lives in reverence and does His will. That someone opened the eyes of a man born blind has never been heard of, never been done, ever. If this man did not come from God, he wouldn't be able to do anything. They said, "You're nothing but dirt. How dare you take that tone with us?" And they threw him out in the street. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out and went and found him. He asked him, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man said, "Point him out to me, sir, so that I can believe in him." Jesus said, "You're looking right at him. Don't you recognize my voice?" "Master, I believe," the man said, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said, "I came into the world to bring everything into the clear light of day, making all the distinctions clear, so that those who have never seen will see, and those who have made a great pretense of seeing will be exposed as blind." Some Pharisees overheard him and said, "Does that mean you're calling us blind?" Jesus said, "If you were really blind, you would be blameless. But since you claim to see everything so well, you are accountable for every fault and failure." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I do believe there are some things that Jesus did intend with this miraculous healing of a man born blind. There are some things that did happen from the mud and the pool that Jesus did intend. And I wonder if we have recognized all that Jesus had intended in this story. Of course, there's a miracle. The man was blind and now he sees, and sure. But I recognize that there's 4 miracles in this story, at least 4, for this man. One of the miracles is the obvious one. His eyes. His eyes. He was born blind. The eyes that never saw the light of day now can see. Now, blindness in that day was, in that place, usually meant more than someone going through life. When we encounter someone who's blind, usually it's the sunglasses or someone's eyes are closed, something like that. But blindness in that day was something very different than what we're used to encountering as blindness here. Purulent ophthalmia is the word for the common form of blindness in that day. Highly infectious, highly contagious. It was propagated by flies that infested the crust, encrusted exudate from infected, irritated eyes. Conjunctivitis. Common in infants was a condition called ophthalmia neonatrum, and it was brought on by malarial fever. And yes, there's malaria in the Middle East. And it was aggravated then by sand and glare and wind. And of course, that was followed by the conjunctivitis and then the flies and then, wow. Various treatments. People tried to alleviate this suffering. You can imagine the suffering. But no cure. And Jesus healed it. It was a miracle. A miracle. Maybe the mud on his eyes kind of helped get that encrusted, scaly exudate off. I don't know how it happened. But Jesus healed that blindness physically healed it. And Jesus also healed not only the man's eyes, but his mind. Jesus healed what was going on right behind the man's eyes. You see, sight cannot be experienced as vision just because the eyes are able to receive an image on the retina. Everything can be working. But if that information doesn't get to the brain, there's no vision. Vision is a partnership between the brain and the eyes. Think of the eyes as the paint and the brain as the artist. Until the brain takes the impulses from the eyes and displays it on the visual cortex, there's no vision possible. One can have perfectly functional eyes and receive a brain injury and go home blind. So consider a brain that is blind from birth. The brain that has never received an image from the retina. If you've never known blue, people could tell you blue all they wanted, and you wouldn't know what blue was, even if you could see it. Religion author and associate editor of the Christian Century, Amy Frankel, draws on Annie Dillard's essay, Seeing, in which Dillard describes a person born blind whose sight was restored through surgery, a healing not unlike this week's gospel lesson. But seeing the world with new vision was far harder than you might think. Frankel writes, the person had to reconcile preconceived notions of the world with objects, colors, and distances. Imagine what you've thought all your life, how a thing must look or a thing must be. And it's not that way. Much of what she simply saw felt wrong. A newly sighted person can easily get meanings wrong. Even though she has a radical new gift, this suggests that a person having received the radical new gift might struggle to understand precisely how to use it. Vision is beyond the function of our eyes. And Jesus healed not only the man's eyes, but his mind in order to give him. I suggest also that there was an emotional miracle that happened this day for the man. Blind from birth, the man had experienced rejection, ridicule since he was a young child. Imagine it, this is all he'd ever known. That gets to you after a while. Messes with your head and your heart and your soul. Ridicule does. A lifetime of it. Perhaps there were times when the man wished he were deaf rather than blind. At least then he couldn't hear what the people were saying about him. Did you notice now, Pastor Julie, I know you talked about mud. And mud is cool. You know I love mud, all these videos. I love mud. I want to try that Traco thing. I ain't going to drive the Traco. I'm going to be... Anyway. But the thing about this story is that the mud didn't do the trick. Put the mud on, and Jesus says, go wash in the pool. He washed in the pool, the Scripture says, and he saw. It was after he washed. So, picture it. On the way to the pool, what it must have been like. Mud all over his face, covering his eyes, and he's trying to find his way to the pool of Siloam. Now, if you think he got ridiculed before when he was sitting there with the flies on his eyes, think now what it's like with him going through town trying to find this pool with mud on his face. Bumping into stuff. Bumping into some of those people. Out of the way, fool! Where do you think you're going? A lifetime of ridicule. And these jeers and taunts must have felt as sharp as swords and spears. This was the epitome of all the ridicule he had received all his life. But on the way home from the pool, picture that. His trip on the way home. What a joy it must have been to see people gasping and wondering and smiling and just overwhelmed at his presence. You know, and think about it. The first place he went was home. This was incredible. I got to go home and share it with Mom and Dad. But where's home? I don't know where home is. Can you tell me how to get home? Turn left at the red brick house. What's red brick? I don't know. Someone had to help him. Someone had to help the man get home. People were caring for him. Never happened. Other than maybe a few Cohens in his cup. People cared for him. And he shared this miracle with his parents, who had suffered all these years to watch their son struggle and nothing they could do. Parents, don't you know that's awful? But the hearts of that man and his parents were healed that day. Troubled hearts. Troubled hearts were never the same. And there was a fourth miracle that day. It was a spiritual healing. This was a healing that all in the story needed, but not all in the story received. Sadly, some in the story couldn't see that they needed help. Some in the story could not see that they needed Jesus' help. Some in the story could not see that they needed a Messiah. And friends, when we can't see that we need Jesus, we're in trouble. And we're blind. And rather than rejoice, they nitpicked. Ooh, don't you know what today is? It's the Sabbath day. It's a bad man. He's healing on the Sabbath. He doesn't keep the Sabbath. He's breaking the law of God. Well, the man's parents didn't care about the details or the rules. He was blind. Now he can see. That's all that's important to them. The man grows spiritually through the story. 3 times he speaks of Jesus. At first, he didn't really know. It was, a man named Jesus. That's all I know. Where is he? I don't know. But all I know is he put some mud on my eyes, told me to go wash, and now look, I'm good. Second time, the Pharisees pushed him about who this Jesus was, and the man concluded, well, he must be a prophet. From I don't know to he's a prophet. But the third time he speaks of Jesus comes as a revelation from God. With the Lord standing right there in front of him, Jesus asked him, do you believe in the Son of Man? The man said, point him out to me, sir. I want to see him so I can believe in him. Jesus said, you're looking right at him. Don't you recognize my voice? Master, I believe. The man said, and the scripture says, and he worshiped him. That's a spiritual healing. To know that you need Jesus, to receive his love, and worship him. The spiritual healing to know that you're in the presence of the Son of Man, the Messiah. The man knew at that moment that this is more than having a good day. It was more than, I'm fine. It was more than a miracle. This was the Messiah that he saw. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.